Yuan Kongya finally made his move against Zhang Yi's wife. Inside the church at this time, the sound of gunfire and shouting from the outside world was incessant, while Yuan Kongya stood in front of the statue with his hands clasped, muttering prayers under his breath. Influenced by her, Zhou Qi also clasped her hands and began to pray to the deity. If you truly exist, please ensure Zhang Yi and his companions are safe and sound. Just then, a cold voice rang out above her head. To receive the deity's blessing, you must first believe in the deity. Yuan Kongya's gaze seemed to possess a soul-entrancing magic, making Zhou Qi dare not meet his eyes. Instead, she turned her face away and muttered through clenched teeth, "Hello, cult leader sister." At that moment, Yuan Kongya watched her and said, "Do you really want to help Zhang Yi solve his troubles and even wish to fight alongside him?" Clearly, his words struck a chord with Zhou Qi. She pondered and said, "Indeed, that's what I think, but unfortunately, I'm just a doctor. I can only handle some medical logistics and don't have the capability to join him on the front lines." Yuan Kongya spoke in a seductive tone, "I think you also have the potential to become a mutant." At these words, Zhou Qi's heart raced. She indeed longed to become a mutant, but she also remembered Zhang Yi's caution to be wary of Yuan Kongya. She couldn't outright refuse, so she responded politely but coolly, "Is that so?" But then, Yuan Kongya's gaze grew even more sincere as he looked at Zhou Qi and said, "You indeed have the potential to become a mutant. You just lack an opportunity." Zhou Qi was moved. Previously, she knew that becoming a mutant required facing life and death, and she didn't have the courage for that. Suddenly, Yuan Kongya walked up to Zhou Qi and said, "We need strength now, and your man needs you too. I can make you a mutant now. Are you willing to accept?" Upon hearing this, Zhou Qi's heartbeat raced. She knew that the woman in front of her indeed had this ability, but she dared not forget Zhang Yi's warning. After hesitating for 2 seconds, Zhou Qi's inner turmoil calmed down. She pushed away Yuan Kongya's extended hand and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I don't really need it." Seeing this, a hint of disappointment flashed in Yuan Kongya's eyes. She turned and said, "You don't need to rush to refuse. Let me know when you have decided. I hope you don't miss this opportunity." After saying this, Yuan Kongya began to pray earnestly with her eyes closed. What is Yuan Kongya's real scheme? Chat with these characters to understand their thoughts. You might be thinking, aren't these characters just virtual? Poly AI can make it happen. Poly AI can bring virtual characters to life, freeing them from the confines of a 2D world. With Poly AI, which includes a vast database of manga characters, you can chat with characters from your favorite manga and break the dimensional barrier, bringing 2D characters into the real world. For example, if I search for Zhang Yi, I can start a conversation with him. We ask, "What abilities do you have?" Zhang Yi respond, "I can store items in space and teleport, and I can kill someone with a glance." We then ask, "Some people say you are selfish. What do you think?" He answer, "I do not care about others. I only care about myself, and if I have to kill someone for my own benefit, I will do it without hesitation." We find Naruto Uzumaki and ask, "What is your ability?" He answer,
"I have the 9-tailed beast abilities. I'm also a genius, and I'm the strongest man alive."
Poly AI has over 10 million downloads worldwide. If you want to chat with a specific character, download Poly AI through the link in the description and use code MANGA77 to unlock premium features. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the fight rapidly escalated into an intense stage. Xiao Honglian clenched her teeth and contacted Bian Junwu, reporting, "We might not last much longer. What's the situation on your end?" Bian Junwu coldly replied, "We are about to find the Corpse King. Just hold on a bit longer." Little did they know, their investigation team was still just observing from the outside. Fortunately, Zhang Yi's side had plenty of ammunition. The bronze-armored zombies had almost been completely eliminated. Finally, "I can take a break," Zhang Yi muttered to himself as he watched Liang Yu and the others fiercely fighting. "As for the other miscellaneous zombie fish, I'll leave them to you." In the snow, Chun-Lei's crowd control was quite effective. Although his attack power was not great, in terms of control ability, he probably surpassed even Wei Dinghai. Chun-Lei controlled the zombies' mobility, while Uncle Yu and Liang Yu handled the chaotic killing. In this manner, after nearly half an hour of intense fighting, the zombie horde began to approach the cathedral, and even the ordinary followers of the snow worship sect started to join the battle. Just then, the giant rats began to burrow in the snow, unexpectedly breaking through the Allied forces' defensive line, and started indiscriminately attacking the ordinary followers of the snow worship sect. Screams were heard one after another, but Xiao Honglian and others simply had no time to attend to them. Even Jingxian blatantly ignored these and could only lament, "Return to the divine kingdom to serve the snow god." Zhang Yi, watching this scene from the rooftop, couldn't help but worry, especially since Zhou Qi was still inside the church. Thinking this, Zhang Yi took out his sniper rifle to start clearing the zombies that were appearing around the church, but the number of zombies continued to increase. Exhausted, Xiao Honglian contacted Bian Junwu again, yelling into the communicator, "You said to hold on for just half an hour. Now it's almost an hour. I see the zombies still swarming in. Are you guys even dealing with the Corpse King?" Bian Junwu still responded coldly, "The pressure from the underground zombie horde is also intense. seconds. Hold on for about 10 more minutes. Xiao Honglian immediately ordered, everyone, concentrate your firepower around the church. As for the other area's snow worship sect followers, abandon them if you have to. After the defensive line was narrowed, the pressure on the allied forces significantly lessened. It could even be said that from the beginning, Bien Junwo had no intention of protecting these people. Their presence was merely to serve as bait. Screams erupted from various parts of the snow worship sect. Just when Zhang Yi thought he could relax a bit, Flower suddenly let out a wary roar, quickly grew larger, and shielded Zhang Yi behind itself. Zhang Yi was also surprised. Although he didn't know what was happening yet, he knew well that if Flower reacted like this, there must be danger approaching. Looking up intently, the sight before him made him break out in a cold sweat. In the darkness, dozens of winged bronze-armored zombies had appeared out of nowhere. Without a word, Flower roared and pounced, instantly biting one of them. Meanwhile, the remaining flying zombies were already swooping toward Zhang Yi. In a critical moment, Zhang Yi instantly activated the dimensional gate, sucking in 2 of the flying zombies. The rest of the flying zombies, seeing this, began to circle in the air. Facing the multi-directional attack of the numerous flying zombies, Zhang Yi's dual gates still had defensive blind spots. However, if truly in danger, Zhang Yi could still use his divine power to strike them down. If he really couldn't beat them, then using the dimensional gate to escape was also an option, as it wouldn't be shameful. Seeing they couldn't gain the upper hand, the flying zombies unexpectedly targeted the ground troops, and then suddenly dove toward the allied forces. Zhang Yi immediately grabbed the communication device and shouted. Suddenly, a group of flying bronze-armored zombies appeared in the sky. Everyone, be careful. The 3 who heard this were all dumbfounded. What's going on? There are flying bronze-armored zombies now. But before they could even marvel, the army of flying zombies was already upon them. The combat power of the flying zombies was no different from the bronze-armored zombies, and one swipe could split a soldier in 2. Seeing this, Xing Tian also went all out, swinging his giant axe at the incoming bronze-armored zombies. Watching this scene from above, Zhang Yi also took a sharp breath. The zombies from afar were still continuously coming, with at least several 100,000 more. They had absolutely no chance of winning unless Bien Junwo successfully killed the Corpse King. Otherwise, they could hold out for at most another half an hour before this place turned into a hell on earth. Thinking this, Zhang Yi immediately notified his squad. You guys fight while retreating. We should be ready to retreat at any time, but the priority is to evacuate Zhou Kir from the church. While thinking, Zhang Yi suddenly noticed that 2 flying zombies had broken through a window into the church. Zhang Yi didn't have time to think much and instantly opened the double gates to reach the church roof. From this distance, Zhang Yi had to travel twice continuously to enter the interior of the church. Just as he was about to open the double gates again to enter the church, the bronze-armored zombies that had just rushed into the church were instantly blasted out. In just a few seconds, 2 bronze-armored zombies were killed. It seemed there was a master inside the church, so Zhou Kir should be temporarily safe. The next second, Zhang Yi opened the double gates to the interior of the church. He immediately saw Zhou Kir huddled in a corner holding a medical kit and quickly ran over, pulling her into his arms and comforting her. It's okay, I'm here, don't be afraid. Yuan Kongya looked at Zhang Yi, who appeared out of nowhere, with some surprise, but after thinking it through, his ability was spatial, so having the ability to travel through space made sense. Zhou Kir looked at Zhang Yi nervously and asked, are we not going to hold? Just then, several zombies actually broke through the door and rushed into the church, tearing wildly. Seeing this, Zhang Yi didn't bother to hide his abilities any longer, directly opened the double gates, and pulled Zhou Kir out of the church. Zhang Yi took Zhou Kir to the rooftop, where the outside had almost turned into a hell on earth. More and more zombies and giant rats had breached the defenses, and only the main forces of several major powers were still desperately defending, preventing the tide from overwhelming everyone. The flying zombies that were preparing to attack had all been dealt with by Flower. Seeing Zhang Yi return to the rooftop, Flower also leapt to Zhang Yi's side. At this moment, Zhou Kir was surprised to find that although all the flying zombies were killed by Flower, Flower did not eat their heads. Zhang Yi also realized what was happening. It seemed these eerie flying zombies didn't have special abilities, which is why Flower didn't absorb them by eating their heads. They must be some sort of specially crafted battle machines. Zhou Kir, seeing the zombies flooding towards them like a tide, asked Zhang Yi with a tense face, what should we do? Zhang Yi looked around. Xiao Honglian and her elite troops were still holding on desperately. Although Wei Dinghai could limit the movement of the zombies, there were simply too many of them. Even the high-spirited Xing Tian Corps, as their stamina gradually depleted, their combat effectiveness was also weakening. Zhang Yi told his squad over the team voice chat, be ready at any time. I will take all of you out of here at the moment the allied forces completely fail. At that moment, Chun Lei, gasping for air, cried out, Brother Zhang, come save me. I can't hold on much longer. Zhang Yi immediately pinpointed Chun Lei's location and then promptly instructed Flower, go fetch Chun Lei. Without hesitation, Flower leapt from the high building, plowing through the zombie horde like a bulldozer along the way, and quickly reached Chun Lei. Flower grabbed Chun Lei by the back with his mouth and, with a few leaps, returned to the rooftop. At this point, Chun Lei was still still shaken. Zhang Yi had no intention of just watching. Just as he pulled out a grenade from another dimension, he noticed that the zombies on the battlefield seemed to undergo some bizarre change. All at once, the zombies suddenly stopped their attack posture, as if toys had their batteries suddenly removed, instantly losing their target. The next second, as if receiving some command, they crazily sprinted back in the direction they came from. Xiao Honglian immediately showed a delighted expression, a scene she had witnessed a few days ago. It must be that Bian Zhengwu had located the Corpse King and made it feel the threat of death. Everyone on the battlefield began to cheer and jump for joy, especially the followers of the Snow Worship sect, who were filled with joy of having survived a disaster. The Allied forces won this human defense battle at an extremely painful cost. Only fewer than 500 survivors remained from the Snow Worship sect, with other forces suffering casualties over 80%. Only Zhang Yi and a few others remained unscathed. Watching the cheering survivors of the Allied forces, Zhang Yi also felt deeply moved. He wrapped his arms around Zhou Qi, gently comforting her. It's all over now. At this time, Uncle Yu and Liang Yu also came to the rooftop, saying, "We're lucky to be alive amidst this misfortune." Zhang Yi looked down from the rooftop at the entire battlefield. After this battle, Heavenly Sea City was thoroughly devastated. The loss of combat power among the major forces was beyond being simply described as painful. However, for Zhang Yi, this was actually a good thing, as they hadn't suffered any substantial losses in this battle. While feeling fortunate, Zhou Qi's voice suddenly rang in his ears. "Brother Zhang Yi, do you need me to check if you're injured?" Saying this, she began to fumble with Zhang Yi's clothes. Seeing the cute and gentle Zhou Qi, Zhang Yi could only repeatedly say, I'm fine, I'm fine." Zhou Qi asked the others as well, and everyone was also largely unharmed. Zhou Qi picked up her medical kit and, looking at the injured soldiers, "Can I go treat them?" Zhang Yi did not refuse. Zhou Qi went to the battlefield looking for the wounded and began administering injections and bandaging with professional techniques. Some soldiers were even moved to tears by this scene. They hadn't felt human warmth in a long time. After she was done, Zhou Qi let out a long sigh of relief. Various forces were also distributing their supplies, and the scene was suddenly filled with a long-missed human warmth. At this moment, Yuan Kongya led the survivors out of the church. She looked at everyone sadly and then said to her subordinates behind her, "Go help them. They are all great warriors." Among these survivors were also the couple, Li Jian. Li Jian, looking at the devastated battlefield, lamented, "Many of these were neighbors I brought along. They trusted me so much, yet it ended like this." His face inevitably showed a look of self-reproach. His wife comforted him. "You can't blame yourself. You did everything you could. In these apocalyptic times, being alive one more day is a blessing. It's not your fault." Much later, Bian Zhengwu and his investigation team returned to the Snow Worship sect. All six appeared to be injured to varying degrees. Li Changqing was supporting Wu Di, who usually was arrogant and overconfident but now seemed very weak, and Kong Sheng's right arm was even twisted into a spiral shape. However, their faces wore smiles of victory. Clearly they had succeeded, but it also showed that the pressure they faced was no less than that here. Zhang Yi immediately stepped forward and asked, "Are all the Corpse Kings killed?" Bian Zhengwu still responded coldly, "5 Corpse Kings, all dealt with. Their bodies are now in the truck." Upon hearing this, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. At that moment, Zhang Yi took out 2 packs of food from the alternate space and, while smiling, handed them to Bian Zhengwu, saying, "This is special food made by mutants. It can help mutants recover their physical and mental state quickly. It's very useful." Bian Zhengwu, upon hearing this, showed a barely noticeable smile. He did not hesitate, directly took the food, and responded, "It seems you have some very good support-type mutants in your team. I'm quite envious." This painful victory made Zhang Yi the biggest winner. Other forces had suffered casualties of over 80%, but Zhang Yi's team had only expended some ammunition, with virtually no other losses. Moreover, ammunition was not a rare commodity for Zhang Yi. He had his own workshop, and as long as he found enough materials, Lu Karen could essentially keep supplying him continuously. Thus, many major forces began to show goodwill towards Zhang Yi. Xiao Honglian was the first to come over, extending her hand in friendship and said, "Brother Zhang Yi, although there have been some unpleasant moments in the past, after fighting side by side this time, can we be friends from now on? War is too cruel for everyone. We cannot afford it. If you ever need my help, feel free to ask." Zhang Yi, who also loves peace, saw Xiao Honglian extend her hand so openly, he did not refuse, and responded with a smile, "As a woman leading a force, I have always admired you." To be honest, Xiao Honglian's command during battle and her bravery in fighting had indeed left a deep impression on Zhang Yi. Curiously, Zhang Yi asked, "Did you train before? I find both your organizational skills and your physical abilities quite impressive." Xiao Honglian smiled faintly. "Before the apocalypse, I was a police inspector in the criminal police team of Heavenly Sea City Police Department." Zhang Yi immediately gave a thumbs up, exclaiming, "Truly a heroic woman." At that moment, an idea flashed in Zhang Yi's mind. "Does that mean you have information on every one of us?" Xiao Honglian spoke openly, "Of course I do, but only up until the apocalypse." She then excused herself and left the area. Watching her walk away, Zhang Yi suddenly thought that it would be great if he could get her help to investigate Yuan Kong Kongya's background. Suddenly, a hand was placed on Zhang Yi's shoulder. Instinctively, Zhang Yi nearly broke Wei Dinghai's hand with a martial arts move. Wei Dinghai's intentions were clear as day. As soon as he saw Zhang Yi, he started complimenting him with phrases like a natural talent and accomplished at a young age, praising him non-stop. Then he asked somewhat mysteriously, "Brother Zhang Yi, I wonder if you're interested in going out to sea. I could take you to experience the vast world overseas when you're free." Zhang Yi immediately thought of the vast ocean, feeling somewhat longing, but then he remembered the dangerous and terrifying creatures of the deep sea, and he shuddered. "I think I'll pass. Maybe just send me some seafood instead." Seeing this, Wei Dinghai laughed and said, "That can be arranged. Next time I go out to sea, I'll bring you some fresh seafood." Hearing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help asking, "You guys also lost quite a few people this time. Are you still planning to go out to sea?" Wei Dinghai sighed and said, "Indeed, we lost quite a few fighters, but fortunately, we still have professionals on board, so going out to sea shouldn't be a problem." Saying this, Wei Dinghai also excused himself and said goodbye to Zhang Yi. At this point, Zhang Yi couldn't help but think, everyone is showing goodwill to me. I wonder if this is a blessing or a curse. However, after this intense battle, Zhang Yi felt increasingly that he should cherish the people around him. Thinking this, he immediately called Zhou Qi over, asking her to get in the car with him, saying he had something very important to do, and he didn't forget to remind Uncle Yu and Liang Yu to keep watch. Liang Yu felt somewhat uncomfortable. She never thought she'd end up keeping watch for someone in such a situation. Uncle Yu, however, took it in stride and joked, "Brother Zhang Yi is young after all. It's understandable that he's full of vigor." Meanwhile, in the car, Zhou Qi had been blushing ever since she got in. After getting Zhou Qi into the car, Zhang Yi asked her seriously, "When you were in the church with Yuan Kongya, did you notice anything unusual about her?" Zhou Qi awkwardly realized what Zhang Yi meant by something important. She thought back briefly and shook her head. There was nothing unusual. Zhang Yi continued to analyze. Yuan Kongya has only two publicly known abilities, both of which are support type. But that night, two bronze-armored flying zombies broke into the church and were blasted out in less than 2 seconds by some kind of ice attack. I think the person who launched the attack was very likely Yuan Kongya. Zhang Yi was well aware of the combat power of the bronze-armored zombies, having experienced it firsthand. To instantly take down two bronze-armored flying zombies, such combat power was definitely not inferior to Xiao Honglian or Wei Dinghai. He urged Zhou Qi to recall more details. Think again carefully. When you were in the church with her, did she do anything unusual, or how did she make her move? As Zhou Qi recalled, she said, "That day she spent most of the time praying. If I have to mention something special, it was when she approached me voluntarily, offering to help me awaken my abilities, but I ultimately refused her. Although I also wanted to become a mutant, I remembered your warning from a few days ago to be careful with Yuan Kongya, so I didn't hesitate to refuse her." Zhang Yi nodded in relief and pondered. This person is so eager to help others awaken their abilities, and even generously offers frost essence. Could there be some ulterior motive? Zhang Yi thought it would be great if Yang Xinxing were here. However, he was slowly formulating a plan. Try to remember the details of that night again, and try not to leave anything out. Zhou Qi nodded and continued. After I refused her, she didn't insist, just told me to find her if I changed my mind. Just then, suddenly two monsters broke through the skylight and into the church. I was sitting in the front row, and it seemed she just made a gesture with her hand, and the two monsters were frozen in midair. With a gesture as if swatting mosquitoes, she flicked her hand, and the two monsters were thrown back out. The whole process probably took only 2 or 3 seconds. Everyone was so frightened at the time, we couldn't even react to what was happening. Hearing this, Zhang Yi's scalp began to tingle. Her abilities are support type. She can freeze flying zombies, which means ice abilities. She reacts quickly, which indicates enhancement abilities. Doesn't this mean she has at least 4 different abilities? Thinking this, Zhang Yi finally understood completely. She couldn't possibly have awakened that many abilities, could she? He finally realized why the Snow Worship sect could so easily give away frost essence, even having their Grand Cleric continually preach and distribute frost essence to those with potential. Recalling the several origin-less husk mutants found on the battlefield of the Battle of the 5 Armies, it all seemed to make sense. The signs suggested that Yuan Kongya's real ability might very well be Death's Return. That is, the abilities of those who awakened through frost essence and died would return to Yuan Kongya. At this moment, an even bolder idea emerged in Zhang Yi's mind. Could this zombie crisis have been created by Yuan Kongya? Was her goal to indiscriminately cause the deaths of more mutants to enhance her own power? But on further thought, this didn't quite make sense. The zombie crisis had nearly brought the Snow Worship sect to the brink of extinction. Yuan Kongya wouldn't be foolish enough to destroy her own foundation. Zhang Yi's thoughts were in disarray, but after calming down, he realized these were just his personal speculations. Now was not the time to speak of this, as even if he did, it was doubtful anyone would believe him. It could also stir up unnecessary trouble by alarming others. After talking with Zhou Qi for 2 hours, Zhang Yi got out of the car with mixed feelings. Looking at the Gothic Church of the Snow Worship sect, he could only comfort himself. I hope I'm just overthinking it. If Yuan Kongya really had the terrifying strength he imagined, the situation would become very tricky. It would undoubtedly be a significant imminent threat to him. But if Yuan Kongya was truly the mastermind behind everything, she could have struck a heavy blow to everyone on that night of fierce fighting with the zombie horde when everyone was already at their limit. She didn't do that. Could it be that she had other concerns? Moreover, considering her delicate appearance, she didn't seem like someone who could control a horde of zombies. The more Zhang Yi thought about it, the more logical it seemed. He figured he might as well investigate secretly for now. At that moment, a few coughs came from not far away. It was Bian Junwoo and his group. Zhang Yi immediately thought, could Yuan Kongya be wary of the people from River South Domain? Zhang Yi felt he was almost going mad. He could only set aside these chaotic thoughts for the moment and walked over to Bian Junwoo and the others. Zhang Yi asked with concern, Captain Bian, how are you feeling? Bian Junwoo removed the handkerchief he had just coughed into, which was covered in dark red bloodstains. Zhang Yi couldn't help but be moved, thinking, it seems he really is gravely ill. Bian Junwoo said indifferently, it's nothing. I probably won't live many more days anyway. Wu Di, looking worried, boss, why don't we go back to Blizzard City first? You should get some treatment quickly. We can't let the illness get worse. Bian Junwoo shook his head and said, there's no need to waste everyone's time. I know my own body best. He knew that River South Domain had made great efforts to preserve him, a battle-hardened Delta-level mutant. They had tried nearly everything possible. Continuing to drag on was pointless. Bian Junwoo told Zhang Yi, our squad will conduct one last search to ensure there are no corpse kings left in Heavenly Sea City. Then we'll return to River South Domain. He suddenly smiled and said, now that Heavenly Sea City has ended up like this, would you consider coming to Blizzard City with us? You can bring your friends too. Zhang Yi smiled lightly and replied, I'm used to staying in my own place. If I change my mind later, I might come to Blizzard City to find you. Wu Di, unable to hold back, do you think you can just go to Blizzard City whenever you want? Zhang Yi did not respond, only advising Bian Junwoo to take good care of himself, then turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Wu Di persisted, saying, don't be in such a hurry to leave. I've heard you're pretty strong, one of the top fighters in Heavenly Sea City. How about a sparring match with me? Wu Di's tone was provocative. Zhang Yi turned back to see the reactions of Bian Junwoo and the others. They seemed to have no intention of stopping this brash young man. To everyone's surprise, Zhang Yi actually raised his hands in a gesture of submission, laughing, my abilities are just moving stuff and sneaking attacks. You're an elite from Blizzard City. Sparring with me is clearly just bullying, isn't it? How about I just admit defeat? Wu Di immediately became agitated, pointing at Zhang Yi and shouting, how can you be so cowardly? After all, you're the boss of a major power in Heavenly Sea City. Where's your pride? Zhang Yi just laughed and waved his hand dismissively. Old what big? We're just a group of friends sticking together for warmth. I've got things to do. You guys chat. After that, Zhang Yi quickly walked away from there, not giving Wu Di a chance to pick a quarrel. Wu Di trembled with anger, pointing at Zhang Yi's departing figure and said to Bian Junwoo, you still want to join us? I feel embarrassed to be teammates with such a coward. Bian Junwoo smiled meaningfully and said, that's exactly why I like him. If everyone in our team were as aggressive as you, we'd be doomed. Zhang Yi didn't bother responding to Wu Di's unwarranted provocation. In his view, people who are still so arrogant and domineering in these apocalyptic times are not likely to live long. If it weren't for Bian Junwoo's protection, despite his slight strength, he would have been killed long ago. Even if Wu Di really wanted to fight Zhang Yi had 100 ways to make his defeat particularly ugly. After leaving them, Zhang Yi felt he couldn't delay any longer. He guessed that Bian Junwoo and Xiao Honglian were probably about to leave. Thinking this, Zhang Yi quickly found Xiao Honglian. His sudden visit surprised Xiao Honglian, but she still graciously asked, brother Zhang Yi, what do you need? Zhang Yi looked around nervously and said, come out for a walk with me. I have something I need to discuss with you. Xiao Honglian looked surprised and then said with a curious expression, you'd better not be hitting on me. You know I'm several years older than you. Zhang Yi burst out laughing. That's not what I mean. I have something serious to ask for your help with. It's not convenient here with so many people around. Xiao Honglian followed Zhang Yi to a ruin, then began, can you tell me what this is about now? Zhang Yi said, you mentioned before that you were a police inspector in Heavenly Sea City before the apocalypse, which means you have access to everyone's data from Heavenly Sea City. Xiao Honglian, curious, asked, almost everyone in Heavenly Sea City is dead. Who are you looking to check on? Zhang Yi, with a mysterious tone, I want to check on everyone from Emerald Waterside, Morning Dew, and all the main leaders of the Snow Worship sect. Hearing this, Xiao Honglian couldn't help asking, at this point, what suspicions do you still have about them? Should I just give you our data too? Zhang Yi laughed and said, I'm just being cautious as usual. It's always good to be prepared. Xiao Honglian frowned and said, I can give you their data, but you can forget about getting any from our Radiant Prosperity base. However, you'll have to give something in exchange. We have enough food, energy, and weapons since there aren't many survivors left in Heavenly Sea City and resources are plentiful. If I give you the data, I only want one promise from you. If one day Radiant Prosperity is in danger, you'll help us. Hearing this, Zhang Yi found it somewhat amusing, thinking, in an apocalypse, who still honors such gentlemen's agreements, especially when it's just verbal. But Zhang Yi agreed anyway, saying, since you trust me so much, of course, I'll agree. To Xiao Honglian, this was just some data in a system. Even giving it away for free wouldn't be a loss, and securing a promise was certainly a profitable deal. The data is in the base's server. I'll send it to you once we get back tomorrow. At the evening meeting, Xiao Honglian expressed their intention to leave to everyone. Wei Dinghai and Xing Tian also indicated that they were about to return as well. However, at that moment, Yuan Kongya suddenly said, "After this brutal battle, all major forces have been severely weakened, and there is undoubtedly a significant gap in combat power, so I've decided to offer my modest help." Saying this, she pulled a box of frost essence from her bosom. However, the supply of frost essence is limited. Each group can only have 2. If you encounter someone with talent, give it to them, or it can also be used on mutants. It can stimulate the human body's potential and make mutants stronger. This statement sent a chill through Zhang Yi's heart. At that moment, Yuan Kongya's gaze seemed to him like that of a massive polar bear. Zhang Yi's suspicion intensified. Could her ability really be Death's Return? After Yuan Kongya finished distributing the frost essence to each team, Zhang Yi couldn't help but remember what Zhou Kir had said. At the time, Yuan Kongya wanted to use frost essence to help Zhou Kir awaken her abilities, but Zhou Kir had refused. This indicated that Yuan Kongya couldn't just force others to accept the frost essence. The faces of the other major forces showed surprise. They had previously used frost essence to create some mutants, which had allowed them to expand their power and successfully secure territory, so they had no doubts about frost essence. They eagerly took the frost essence into their hands, continuously expressing their thanks. Bian Junwo also took the frost essence. Although skeptical, he thought it harmless to take it back to River South Domain for study. Only Zhang Yi was still trying to manage his expression, telling himself to stay calm and not let Yuan Kongya notice anything unusual. Thinking this, Zhang Yi looked up and said, "Thank you, sect leader Yuan. I will remember this favor." Yuan Kongya nodded and said, "In the future, we may become one entity, and supporting each other is only right." Shortly afterward, the group left the church. Zhang Yi had 3 frost essence, just enough for Zhou Kir, Yang Xinxin, and Lu Karen to use. As long as the hosts don't die, their powers wouldn't return to Yuan Kongya. Looking at the others, Zhang Yi wondered, should he warn them? But in the end, Zhang Yi dismissed the thought. If they betrayed him, it would backfire, and he wasn't concerned with their fates anyway. The next day, as the major forces packed up to leave, Zhang Yi came to say goodbye to Xiao Honglian. He reminded her not to forget about the data. Surprisingly, Xiao Honglian warmly embraced Zhang Yi with a big bear hug. "Don't worry, I'll arrange to send it to you as soon as I get back. And don't forget the promise you made to me." Zhang Yi, somewhat taken aback, "It's a deal then." As the two were embracing, they suddenly heard a heated argument not far away. Looking towards the source of the noise, it turned out to be Li Jian's son, Li Kelly. His girlfriend, Su Bebe, seemed to have found someone new. Li Kelly was saying excitedly, "Didn't we agree to spend our lives together? You can't leave me." But Su Bebe was leaning against a tall and formidable officer from the Radiant Prosperity base, saying, "We're not suitable anymore. I've found a better place to be. He can provide me with a better life." Li Kelly's eyes were filled with dissatisfaction and fear. "You can't leave me. If you dare to leave me, I'll die right here and now." Saying this, he actually lunged towards Su Bebe. Su Bebe pushed him away and said, "You've become a eunuch now. Stop deluding yourself. To tell you the truth, I agreed to be with you only because your father was a priest. Just give up already." After saying this, she didn't look back and left with the officer. Zhang Yi watched this drama unfold and couldn't help thinking, how did he suddenly become a eunuch? Could it be so cold that it froze that off? After Su Bebe left Li Kelly behind and walked away with an officer from the Radiant Prosperity base, Li Kelly, utterly despondent, let out a noise like a wounded animal and ran wildly into the distance. Xiao Honglian, watching the scene, couldn't help but laugh. That kid is still too naive. Looks like he hasn't been beaten down by life yet. Zhang Yi, however, didn't make fun of Li Kelly. He just sighed and said, this might actually help him grow up faster, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Subsequently, Zhang Yi bid farewell to Xiao Honglian, then turned to see Li Jian and his wife running out to look for Li Kelly. A few days later, Zhang Yi received the data sent by Xiao Honglian. He thought that continuing to stay at the Snow Worship sect didn't seem to yield any useful information. It was time to return to the shelter, and he could also share the data with Yang Xinxin and others for analysis. Thinking this, Zhang Yi decided to speak with Bian Junwo one last time. He went to Bian Junwo's location and said he wanted to talk privately. Bian Junwo thought Zhang Yi had changed his mind, but Zhang Yi indicated it was just a casual chat. Bian Junwo nodded and pointed to a distant place, saying, "Let's talk over there." After they had moved away from the crowd, Bian Junwo asked indifferently as usual, "What is it? You can speak frankly, no one's around." Knowing Bian Junwo disliked beating around the bush, Zhang Yi directly said, "Captain Bian, I hope you can stay a few more days in Heavenly Sea City. I feel something is off about this mission. I suspect the Corpse King was just a decoy. We always thought the Corpse King had high intelligence, but from the battle, it seems it couldn't even see through such a simple diversion." Bian Junwo pondered and said, "We've considered this, but we think that the hairy monkey, after all, is not human and its intelligence is definitely limited. Moreover, since we killed the Corpse King, the zombie horde indeed disappeared. Isn't that the best proof?" Zhang Yi smiled at Bian Junwo and said, "What if there is a creature higher up than the Corpse King controlling it?" Bian Junwo, not understanding the implication of Zhang Yi's words, frowned and said, What are you trying to say? Don't beat around the bush, just tell me. Zhang Yi looked at Bian Junwu and thought for a moment. At this point, he had to persuade the investigation team to stay in Heavenly Sea City. If everything was as Zhang Yi suspected, with Yuan Kongya and Jing Yixian being the masterminds behind the scenes, then it was crucial for the investigation team to remain in Heavenly Sea City, so they wouldn't dare to make a move carelessly. Thinking this, Zhang Yi said, I strongly suspect that there is someone behind the zombie horde, and the so-called Corpse King is just a puppet. There's even a more terrifying possibility. This zombie horde battle might just be a drama directed by the mastermind, aimed at convincing you that the mission is accomplished, then getting you out of Heavenly Sea City. All of this is just to mislead you. Upon hearing this, Bian Junwu was immediately stunned. Zhang Yi continued to share his suspicions with Bian Junwu. The zombie battle seemed tough, but to me, it was suspiciously smooth. It felt as if the horde was deliberately cooperating with us. Every step was predictable, and everything seemed like a well-orchestrated play. Bian Junwu was silent for a long while, then suddenly asked, What do you suspect? You seem to be overly suspicious. Do you have any concrete evidence? Zhang Yi sighed helplessly and said, These are just my suspicions. Indeed, there are some dubious points, but I don't have solid evidence yet. Bian Junwu smirked, his smile loaded with meaning. Your cautious attitude is excellent. Being overly cautious can be exhausting, but in these apocalyptic times, only those who are careful can survive longer. However, you needn't worry too much. Even if there is some mastermind behind the scenes, for River South Domain, they're just minor trouble. If they dare do anything that threatens stability, we can intervene at any time to suppress them. Hearing this, Zhang Yi finally breathed a sigh of relief. He hadn't expected to convince the investigation team to stay in Heavenly Sea City with just a few words, but as long as he planted a seed of doubt in Bian Junwu's mind, Bian Junwu's capabilities, he would surely pick up on any clues. Zhang Yi smiled and said, That puts my mind at ease. So, if anything happens in Heavenly Sea City again, as long as you're informed in time, you won't just stand by, right? Bian Junwu pushed up his sunglasses, his expression serious. As long as it's within River South Domain's jurisdiction and it escalates to a sufficient threat level, we will definitely intervene. If you're really worried about this, why not come back with us? After all, Blizzard City is the safest place in the entire River South Domain. Zhang Yi waved his hand and said, We'll see about that later. I need to take my team back to the shelter now. As they were about to leave, Li Jian suddenly appeared in front of them, looking despondent. He suddenly grabbed Zhang Yi's hand, exclaiming emotionally, My poor son. Clearly, after his son had run off in despair the day before, Li Jian and his wife likely hadn't found him, or if they did, he was already gone. After saying goodbye to Bian Junwu, Zhang Yi and his team drove away from the snow worship sect. Watching Zhang Yi's departing car, Bian Junwu couldn't help but mutter, It seems we need to stay in Heavenly Sea City a bit longer. On the way back, Zhang Yi felt incredibly conflicted. He pulled out a white cloth from his pocket, which Li Jian had just given him. Li Jian told him that this was a piece of cloth he discovered some secrets on after the Grand Cleric of the Snow Worship sect had brought him and his neighbors there. After learning about Li Jian's abilities, Yuan Kongya had him take care of the blood vines. Initially, Li Jian thought this was just a source of food for the Snow Worship sect, but he later found that the red fruits caused disorientation and excitement, similar to the hallucinogenic effects of drugs. Zhang Yi looked at the cloth and struggled to calm his emotions. At that moment, Zhou Qir, sitting in the passenger seat, leaned over curiously and asked, What's that? Zhang Yi quickly tucked it back into his pocket, saying, It's nothing, just some underwear I changed out of. At this, Chun Lei in the back seat burst into laughter. Zhou Qir's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she did not pursue the matter further. With Li Jian's secret message, Zhang Yi became even more convinced of his suspicions, thinking that there must be more sinister plots behind the Snow Worship sect. Since learning that Zhang Yi was returning to the shelter, Yang Xinxin had been eagerly waiting by the window, watching the aimless zombies on the snowfield. Yang Xinxin sighed helplessly, thinking she might never get the chance to fight alongside brother Zhang Yi in her lifetime. Just then, two snow vehicles appeared on the snowfield. Yang Xinxin shouted excitedly, They're back, they're back. As soon as Zhang Yi and the others entered, Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen rushed to Zhang Yi, excitedly calling him brother. Yang Xinxin even said somewhat guiltily, It's our fault for being useless, unable to join you in adventures outside, just staying at home, doing nothing. Zhang Yi smiled and patted the heads of the two girls, saying, We didn't encounter any danger, and you don't need to blame yourselves too much. Everyone has different abilities, just doing our own jobs well is enough. At that time, Yang Mi had already prepared a full table of food to welcome everyone back. The whole family gathered around the large round table to eat and drink heartily. After everyone had their fill, Zhang Yi began to ask, Has anything unusual happened at the shelter while we were away? Yang Mi shook her head and said, Aside from a few stray zombies wandering outside these past few days, nothing else has happened. The first few days after you left were eerily quiet. Zhang Yi also briefly discussed the situation on the battlefield. While our team came back unscathed, other forces weren't so lucky. They lost more than 80%, and some squads were completely wiped out. Lu Karen, somewhat melancholic, after this zombie crisis, aside from the Snow Worship sect and a few major bases, it's likely very hard to find any survivors survivors in Heavenly Sea City now. Suddenly, a strong sense of loneliness surged over everyone. At that moment, Chun-Li suddenly shouted, "Cheers, let's not be so sad. As long as we're all alive, we should enjoy eating and drinking. This hard-won victory deserves a proper celebration." Zhang Yi asked Yang Mi, "How's the research on the mutant food going?" Zhang Yi has always placed great importance on the storage of strategic materials. Yang Mi proudly said, "I've been busy every day making it. The fridge is almost full now." At that moment, Chun-Li suddenly jumped up and ran to the bathroom. He had just drunk 2 bottles of red wine by himself, deciding to indulge wildly since he had survived the ordeal. After the banquet, Zhang Yi stood up and called Yang Xinxin, "Come with me to the control room. I have important data for you to help me review." Zhang Yi opened the data sent by Xiao Honglian, which included details about the leaders and deputies of the major bases, except for the Radiant Prosperity base. However, the person Zhang Yi was most concerned about in these documents was Yuan Kongye. As for the others, they were more like smoke screens, intended to keep Xiao Honglian from becoming unnecessarily suspicious. Zhang Yi planned to analyze this Yuan Kongye with Yang Xinxin. Xiao Honglian sent very comprehensive information, which included not only personal biographies and developmental histories but also detailed family backgrounds. After reading Yuan Kongye's information, both of them fell silent. Yuan Kongye, 20 years old, is of mixed country Hua and country Neon descent. Both her parents were devout followers of the country Neon Divine Reason sect. Yuan Kongye moved to Heavenly Sea City in country Hua with her parents at the age of 3, where her father, Yuan Suiyun, established a branch of the Divine Reason sect that same year. However, this sect was classified as a cult by the country Hua government, forcing them to operate underground. To attract more followers, her parents falsely claimed that their daughter, Yuan Kongye, possessed divine powers, and thus declared her the Holy Maiden of the Divine Reason sect. Using religious manipulation, the Yuan family quickly amassed a vast fortune. As a result, Yuan Kongye lived a privileged life from childhood, treated almost like a princess within the sect. 13 years later, her parents died in a plane crash on their way to a Divine Reason sect meeting in country Neon. Only then did the followers realize they had been deceived. At just 16, Yuan Kongye lacked the ability to control the situation, and the truth of her lack of divine powers was quickly revealed. The so-called doctrine of the sect was that followers could receive divine blessings by donating property, and, after reaching a certain amount, they could enter the divine kingdom after death. Many followers went bankrupt because of this, and now the angry followers directed all their resentment towards Yuan Kongye. When she was found, Yuan Kongye had been tortured beyond human recognition, suffering permanent scarring all over her body. The Heavenly Sea City Police received a report in 2046, but due to the large number of people involved and the involvement of a cult, the case was hastily closed. Since then, Yuan Kongye vanished from public view, disappearing until the onset of the Ice Age apocalypse, when she used the Divine Reason sect's manipulative techniques to establish the Snow Worship sect and rapidly expand it. After reading this, Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin were silent. Xiao Honglian's information was indeed detailed. They could even see the case files involving up to 136 individuals. It was hard to imagine what Yuan Kongye had been through. At that moment, Zhang Yi shared his suspicion. "I suspect Yuan Kongye's ability is Death's Return. The frost essence she concocted can awaken abilities in others, but upon their death, their abilities all return to Yuan Kongye. This zombie horde was created by her to harvest the abilities of the deceased. This ability, when you think about it, is truly terrifying. I can't sleep without getting to the bottom of this. Given the horrors Yuan Kongye has endured, expecting her to be a savior in the apocalypse is impossible. Even maintaining her mental stability is difficult." Yang Xinxin sighed, saying, "If it were me, I'd probably think about destroying the whole world or shaping it to my liking." At this, Zhang Yi suddenly realized he had always thought Yuan Kongye wouldn't let the Snow Worship sect suffer such losses just to gain abilities, but now he realized that perhaps she didn't care about the lives of her followers at all. Her actions were merely to cover up her own schemes. Curiously, Yang Xinxin asked, "Do you have evidence to prove this?" Zhang Yi's lips curled slightly. "I didn't before, but now I do." Zhang Yi told Yang Xinxin that during the corpse-tide battle, Yuan Kongye demonstrated 2 special abilities. It is known that she possesses 4 completely unrelated powers: the blessings known to outsiders, and the physical abilities typical of the enhancement class, as well as the familiar ice and snow abilities. According to current understanding, it is impossible for one person to awaken multiple unrelated abilities simultaneously. Moreover, if these were abilities she awakened herself, she wouldn't need to hide them so deliberately. This suggests that there must be some unspeakable secret involved, which confirms my suspicion. Her abilities were stolen from others, using frost essence as the means. Upon hearing this, Yang Xinxin also spoke seriously. If her ability pattern is indeed like this, then to what extent is Yuan Kongye powerful now? We can't even begin to estimate. According to the existing analysis of awakened individuals, every mutant has their weakness. But if one person possesses multiple types of abilities, and the weaknesses of these abilities complement each other, this person could become invincible. Zhang Yi also analyzed. That's why she is the one who most wants Heavenly Sea City to fall into chaos. Only when those awakened through Frost Essence die can Yuan Kongya continue to grow stronger. Her targets could even include her own subordinates. After all, many mutants in the Snow Worship sect are awakened through Frost Essence, and their deaths would undoubtedly be beneficial for Yuan Kongya. Yang Xinxin thought Zhang Yi's analysis made sense, but it was only speculation. There was no way to find direct evidence. The current situation is very passive. She has already used the corpse tide to significantly weaken the forces of the four families, and she also distributed Frost Essence to everyone before leaving, which means she is likely planning to make a move on everyone. The only estimate now is that once Bian Junwo from the River South Domain investigation team leaves Heavenly Sea City, the Snow Worship sect is sure to act. Saying this, Zhang Yi took out a white cloth from his trouser pocket and handed it to Yang Xinxin. This might be evidence. It turned out that Li Jian had secretly stuffed the cloth with a lot of information. He wrote on the white cloth that the fruit of the blood vine has hallucinogenic effects, and some of its roots seem to be nurturing zombie-like creatures. Also, boys joining the Snow Worship sect must first undergo a purification ritual personally performed by Yuan Kongya, which involves castration. Moreover, Yuan Kongya once strangled a female priest with her own hands. Yang Xinxin looked at the white cloth with a shocked face, now understanding why Zhang Yi was so concerned. Zhang Yi pondered and said, there must definitely be a problem with Yuan Kongya. Li Jian is a priest of the Snow Worship sect and is closer to the core of the sect. What he wrote, along with the problems I've identified, almost certainly confirms that there are significant issues with both Yuan Kongya and the Snow Worship sect itself. The so-called gifting of Frost Essence is a huge conspiracy, and even the zombie crisis could be related to her. If the people from River South Domain hadn't arrived in time, we probably would have been in great danger. Zhang Yi said with a worried look. Yuan Kongya is definitely an antisocial personality, but although her experiences are tragic, they can't be considered innocent. It's more like karmic retribution. Yang Xinxin also said solemnly, with such experiences, it's not surprising she turned out this way. But this isn't what we should be focusing on now. The urgent matter is to figure out how to deal with her threat. Zhang Yi is well aware that Yuan Kongya has absorbed the abilities of countless individuals by now, and her current strength is almost certainly beyond his own. She could be described as an invincible being, and this invincible existence is definitely going to take action against them. Thinking this, Zhang Yi started to panic. If we really have to confront Yuan Kongya, relying solely on ourselves will definitely not be enough. First of all, it's essential to let the other forces know about her conspiracy. But even if other forces unite, they might not be a match for Yuan Kongya, especially when there's insufficient evidence, which could easily lead to her turning the tables on us. The most important thing is, even if Yuan Kongya really schemes against everyone, it doesn't matter much to River South Domain. The investigation team is only here to maintain stability, not to dispense justice. As long as it doesn't threaten the dominance of River South Domain, whether they intervene can completely depend on their mood. At this moment, Zhang Yi suddenly had a thought. Maybe River South Domain will even recruit Yuan Kongya for their own use. In that case, I'm definitely doomed. Zhang Yi even began to consider the idea of defecting to Bian Junwo. But if I really went to River South Domain, I'd just be another cog in the machine, and all rights are acquired at a price. Even someone as powerful as Bian Junwo, despite knowing that using his abilities would shorten his life, he still has to tirelessly work for the mission. Yang Xinxin said indifferently, everyone in the world acts for profit. As long as we grasp their core interests, even River South Domain can be manipulated by us. Zhang Yi was confused. Yang Xinxin, tilting her head and smiling, asked Zhang Yi, what do you think River South Domain is most worried about? Someone undermining their ruling position. Yang Xinxin, with a deeper smile, then we make them believe that Yuan Kongya poses a severe threat to their rule. They are worried about the corpse tide. We'll let the investigation team know that the corpse tide was artificially created by Yuan Kongya. Zhang Yi said somewhat helplessly, you think I don't want to? The most important thing is that there's no evidence. The blood vine I secretly took that night. Shokir has already studied it and found nothing related to the zombie virus. Yang Xinxin looked at Zhang Yi as if he were a fool. Sometimes, you don't necessarily need evidence to act. Just pin everything on Yuan Kongya, make them suspect her, and River South Domain will naturally find a way to investigate Yuan Kongya. I believe with the capabilities of River South Domain, they will quickly uncover some clues. Zhang Yi suddenly realized this method is indeed brilliant. As long as we exaggerate the threat of Yuan Kongya, River South Domain cannot afford to ignore her. To put it simply, it's about wildly spreading rumors about Yuan Kongya. Yang Xinxin said lightly, it seems my brother Zhang Yi isn't so foolish after all. Yang Xinxin continued, what we can be certain of now is that Yuan Kongya possesses multiple abilities. Just based on this alone, River South Domain would definitely be extremely interested in her. To Zhang Yi, this revelation was earth-shattering. This tactic was indeed perfect. As long as River South Domain's attention is drawn, she wouldn't dare act recklessly. People from River South Domain might even take her away for investigation, which would mean they were safe. Though the idea was excellent, it required meticulous planning of each step. There's no room for error hers now. Zhang Yi asked Yang Xinxin to open Jing Yixian's file and discovered that Jing Yixian was born into a middle-class family in Heavenly Sea City and had known Yuan Kongya since childhood. He had also disappeared with Yuan Kongya for some time. After Yuan Kongya's incident, it could be assumed that this huge conspiracy was likely known to Jing Yixian, or even that it was a plot concocted by the two of them. His other subordinates were probably unaware. After all, many had been severely injured or killed during the Great Battle, and many mutants had died as well. It was impossible for them to act that realistically. Thus, it could be said that those mutant congregants were merely nourishment cultivated by Yuan Kongya. No wonder the Snow Worship sect was so eager to recruit congregants. They were selecting talented individuals to serve as food for Yuan Kongya, eventually consolidating all abilities into her hands alone. Zhang Yi's thoughts became clearer, and his sense of dread grew stronger. He wondered how many people's abilities Yuan Kongya had absorbed. Such power seemed too invincible. After leaving the control room, Zhang Yi threw himself onto the plush velvet king-sized bed. This was a mattress that Wang Siming had custom-ordered from Rome for $1 million. Zhang Yi thought that if it really came to fleeing to River South Domain, he'd definitely have to take this bed with him. Lying on the bed, Zhang Yi hadn't relaxed for more than a few seconds before many words floated around in his mind. As long as Yuan Kongya was not dealt with, he would never have peace. Lying in bed, his mind in turmoil, he couldn't understand why the copper-armored flying corpse had attacked the church that night. If the zombies were controlled by Yuan Kongya behind the scenes, why would they still intend to harm her? Could there be someone else controlling the zombies? Was there some sort of cooperation with Yuan Kongya? Could the corpse tide and the blood vine actually be connected? But Zhou Kier had also confirmed that no virus related to zombies had been found in the blood vine. With all these doubts, Zhang Yi gradually closed his eyes. Suddenly, Zhang Yi found himself in the middle of that abandoned building. Only this time, the blood vine in front of him was taller than he remembered, stretching almost thousands of meters. But in his memory, that blood vine was only about 100 meters tall. At that moment, he saw an extremely shocking scene. Beneath the tall blood vine were tangled and complex roots, and at the ends of these roots were zombies. Zhang Yi then realized he had always focused on what was above ground and had overlooked the roots of the blood vine. Zombies preferred the dark, damp underground environment. In a daze, Zhang Yi seemed to see a figure. Focusing his eyes, it was Li Jian, who possessed the ability to sacrifice himself. He saw him nourishing the blood vine with his own blood, and the vine visibly began to thrive, with the zombies hanging on the edges starting to plump up rapidly. Seeing this, Zhang Yi suddenly understood the cause and effect of the situation. It turned out that Li Jian was the key. While pondering, thousands of zombies on the roots suddenly opened their eyes and stared fiercely at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi was jolted awake by this scene, gasping for breath, his face filled with disbelief. The previously complex and intertwined clues suddenly started to clear up because of a dream. Zhang Yi immediately got up, picked up his notebook, and began to sort out the timeline of the entire event. The zombie crisis emerged just a week after Li Jian was brought to the Snow Worship sect. This meant that with the enhancement of Li Jian's sacrificial ability, the blood vine was strengthened in a short time, eventually allowing it to rapidly breed a zombie king. The zombie king then injected the virus into ripe corpses, thereby mass-producing zombies. Yuan Kongya could control the blood vine and give orders to the zombie king, but she couldn't directly command the zombie hordes, which is why there was a scene of zombies attacking Yuan Kongya. As for why the infiltration into the building ultimately yielded nothing, it's likely that the Snow Worship sect had prepared in advance, then deliberately revealed flaws to let us investigate, intending to alleviate our suspicions. After sorting all this out, Zhang Yi finally breathed a sigh of relief. Since Yuan Kongya could control the zombie tide, she wouldn't allow her powerful weapon to be completely destroyed. Thus, this zombie battle was likely a show performed for the River South Domain. Once the investigation team leaves, Yuan Kongya will definitely make her move against others. However, even though she has absorbed the power of many mutants, she can't possibly think about eliminating all our forces by herself, so she must still have a considerable zombie horde at her disposal. The urgent task now is to keep Bian Zhengwu from leaving. But worryingly, if we directly confront Yuan Kongya, given her terrifying strength, even the investigation team might be helpless against her. Even if Bian Zhengwu has the strength to fight her, would he choose to overextend his life to battle her? Just as Zhang Yi worried whether the current Bian Zhengwu was still a match for Yuan Kongya, a knock on the door came from outside. It was Yang Xinxin. Zhang Yi told Yang Xinxin about the dream and passed on the entire sequence of events he had sorted out to her. After reading it, Yang Xinxin quietly closed the notebook, and a plan began to slowly form in her mind. At this time, within the Snow Worship sect, after several major forces had left, the few hundred surviving congregants of the Snow Worship sect began to rebuild their home. Those who survived were mainly the church's hierarchy and some luckier believers. High Priest Jing Yixian calmly directed everyone, methodically rearranging their dwellings. He then walked into the church alone, ready to discuss the next steps of their plan with Yuan Kongya. Yuan Kongya, as always, stood in front of the altar, devoutly praying. Approaching her, Jing Yixian smiled and said, "Everything is going as expected. Our plan is progressing smoothly. No no one in Heavenly Sea City can stop us. The sacrifice of our tens of thousands of congregants was not in vain. At least it won't make others suspect us. They might even pity us. Now we just need to wait for the people from River South Domain to leave. At this point, Yuan Kongya expressed some concerns. However, there's one thing I am still not at ease about. Jing Yixin, puzzled, replied, our plan should be perfect. Even the bloodvine has been handled flawlessly. What else could you possibly be worried about? Yuan Kongya turned and told Jing Yixin. That night, 2 copper-armored flying corpses suddenly flew towards me. In a moment of urgency, I used someone else's ability, and this scene might have been seen by the woman that Zhang Yi brought along. This could potentially become a problem. A sharp gleam flashed in Jing Yixin's eyes, and 2 seconds later, he laughed dismissively. That shouldn't be a problem. There are so many different types of mutants in this world. Who can say that a person can't have multiple abilities? Given the heavy casualties our snow worship sect has suffered, it's unlikely anyone would suspect us. Even if they do, there's no need to worry too much. At most, they might uncover the secret of Frost Essence, but River South Domain has no reason to intervene. As for everyone else, they no longer pose a threat now. As he spoke, Jing Yixin's face was filled with arrogance. Yuan Kongya nodded. You're right. In the face of absolute power, everything else becomes irrelevant. The world now follows the law of the jungle, where only the strong survive. Once the people from River South Domain leave, it will be time for us to make our move. A gleam of ambition flashed in Yuan Kongya's eyes. The remaining mutants from the major forces are now within my grasp. Once I successfully absorb their abilities, my power will reach a height unimaginable to ordinary people. Soon, I will become the god of this new world and tread all underfoot. After a long discussion with Zhang Yi, Yang Xinxin gave her own action plan. Firstly, it was to locate those hidden zombies. Once the existence of the zombie horde is confirmed, River South Domain will surely take greater precautions. However, Zhang Yi himself knew that now was not the time to tell others. To avoid unnecessary panic or alerting the enemy prematurely, he must first secretly complete the search for the zombies alone. Yang Xinxin also saw Zhang Yi's intention. Are you planning to do this alone? Zhang Yi firmly stood up. It seems I'm the only one who can do this now. The next morning, the shelter was still peaceful, and everyone thought the zombie crisis was over and they could finally live peacefully. After breakfast, Zhang Yi planned to go out alone to start his search for zombies. Uncle Yu immediately asked, what are you going out for? Do you want me to accompany you? Zhang Yi turned around and smiled. Although the zombie king has been dealt with, there are still quite a few scattered zombies. I'm going out to clear them up and practice the knife skills Liang Yu taught me. Hearing this, Liang Yu stood up. Then I'll go too, and I can teach you some practical combat skills. Uncle Yu and Chun Lei also expressed their desire to go. Zhang Yi declined. There's no need for that. We're not dealing with the zombie king or copper-armored zombies. No need to make such a fuss. If you really want to go, let's split up and each person will take care of a different area. Everyone agreed with Zhang Yi's suggestion and got up to prepare to leave. At that moment, Flower suddenly came out and quickly jumped onto Zhang Yi's shoulder. Zhang Yi smiled contentedly. Then Flower will come with me. Actually, bringing Flower along this time was not because he needed a bodyguard. After mastering the double gate technique, Zhang Yi's ability to protect himself was almost invincible. As long as he wanted to escape, by continuously opening the double gate and moving through it, catching him would be next to impossible. What he needed was Flower's evolved strong sense of smell. Zhang Yi took Flower to the next Channel Garden station, where the entire subway tunnel was frozen over with hard ice. Zhang Yi planned to search along the branch line towards the Celestial Tribute area. Soon, they reached the subway entrance of the Celestial Tribute area, which was still more than 10 kilometers away from the Snow Worship Sect's headquarters. One man and one cat entered the tunnel. Heavenly Sea City's subway network is very extensive, and Zhang Yi judged that the hidden zombie tide would definitely be near the Snow Worship Sect. The man and the cat began to traverse the subway tunnels. Flower's sense of smell could detect the presence of zombies within a kilometer. Every so often, Zhang Yi would stop and ask Flower if there were any abnormalities. They were always careful as they walked. After all, during the search, they couldn't let the zombie tide detect them first, otherwise the information might get passed to Yuan Kongya, and then he would be exposed. 2 hours later, they had almost searched every station in the Celestial Tribute area, but both man and cat had still found nothing. Zhang Yi continued to expand the search area, using the double gates to shuttle between locations, marking each spot on the map as he searched. Just as he reached the northeastern edge of Heavenly Sea City, the usually calm Flower suddenly showed an unusual reaction, its fur bristling instantly as it stared fixedly into the dark tunnel ahead. Zhang Yi quickly pulled out the satellite positioning device. So we've come all the way here. The Turtle Mountain District is located on the northeastern edge of Heavenly Sea City, almost at the urban-rural boundary, and lacks significant resources, making it a no-man's land to this day. Yuan Kongya's decision to hide the zombie horde here was indeed a very wise choice. Looking into the dark and deep subway depths, Zhang Yi dared not rush in. Although his spatial traversal ability could ensure his and Flower's safe return, inadvertently alarming the zombie horde could likely trigger a zombie uprising. Moreover, his information could possibly be transmitted to Yuan Kongya, potentially forcing her to accelerate her her plans. Thinking this, Zhang Yi opened the alternate space and took out a black giant rat. This mechanical rat, crafted by Liu Karen, was so realistically designed that it could be mistaken for a real one. Moreover, after repeatedly being smeared with the blood and flesh of a giant rat, it would be nearly impossible to detect any issues unless dissected. Zhang Yi began to control the mechanical rat to sneak deeper into the tunnel while he and Flower retreated to a safe distance. He watched carefully every image transmitted by the mechanical rat. After 2 whole hours, the mechanical rat had traversed nearly the entire Turtle Mountain area, yet still no trace of zombies was found. Zhang Yi began to doubt himself. Am I overthinking all of this? Just as he was about to give up the search, the mechanical rat sent back a scene that shocked him profoundly. The subway tunnels were crammed with zombies. Located at the deepest part of the Turtle Mountain District's subway, the zombie horde was layered upon layers, filling multiple lines and stretching for nearly 10 kilometers. The number was estimated to be at least in the millions, and that was a conservative estimate. Zhang Yi broke out in a cold sweat, thinking that with nearly 20 million people dead in Heavenly Sea City, if Yuan Kongya had enough time, she would surely turn all 20 million corpses into zombies. It seemed that time was of the essence, and he must hurry to inform Bian Junwu. As for the mechanical rat, it would not be brought back for now. He directed the mechanical rat to leave the zombie mass and enter a sewer, then put it in standby mode, ready to await further instructions. Using his spatial traversal ability, he transported himself to the surface. Feeling the cold winds and the vast snowy plains outside, Zhang Yi felt a heavy weight in his heart. Although this trip had confirmed his suspicions, there was no excitement to be felt, as he was well aware that the real challenge had just begun. After the victory over the zombie horde, the investigation team continued to conduct a thorough investigation of Heavenly Sea City. But after more than 10 days, they had not found any remaining traces of the zombie king. Gradually, they began to truly believe that the zombie crisis might indeed be over. Wu Di said with a sigh of relief, "It looks like we can go back to receive our rewards now, and we can finally take a good break." Everyone had a smile on their face, all agreeing with Wu Di's statement. Bailey Changqing glanced at Bian Junwu, knowing that the decision to return or not was ultimately up to the boss. However, he also said, "The scattered zombies in Heavenly Sea City can now be handled by the local forces. We really should head back to Blizzard City to rest, especially you, boss. You can't keep pushing your health." Bian Junwu pushed up his toad sunglasses and said softly, "Indeed, we can consider withdrawing." But he also thought to himself that the mission seemed to have gone too smoothly. Something felt off. However, after more than 10 days, no suspicious points were found, and they couldn't keep lingering in Heavenly Sea City forever. Thinking this, Bian Junwu slowly said, "Then let's head back to Blizzard City to report. If anything changes later, we can always get in touch with Zhang Yi and his team." The investigation team burst into cheers. Qi Guangming excitedly high-fived Wu Di. They should receive a good reward from headquarters for successfully completing the mission. Most importantly, they could finally take a proper break. At that moment, Bailey Changqing said somewhat regretfully, "It's just a pity that Zhang Yi and Yuan Kongya aren't coming back with us." Meng Siyu couldn't help but ask, "It seems the deputy leader thinks highly of those two." Bailey Changqing smiled. "The ability users from Heavenly Sea City are quite good, but Zhang Yi and Yuan Kongya have the most special abilities." Meng Siyu pondered and said, "Zhang Yi's ability is indeed rare. Ability users with such unique traits reaching Delta level are extremely rare, and Yuan Kongya's ability is of strategic level. As for Xiao Holian, Xing Tian, and Wei Dinghai, they are more combat-oriented, and we at Blizzard City don't lack such talents." At this point, Bian Junwu also sighed and said, "Let's discuss this matter slowly later. Zhang Yi's ability is indeed rare, but if he doesn't want to come to Blizzard City, we won't force him. As for Yuan Kongya, once we confirm that her ability can mass-produce mutants, then it won't be up to her whether she comes or not." Just then, Bian Junwu suddenly received a call request from Zhang Yi. Bailey Changqing, seeing this, asked, "It wouldn't be a new mission from headquarters?" Bian Junwu said indifferently, "It's Zhang Yi." Upon hearing Zhang Yi's name, Wu Di looked annoyed. This guy, he doesn't call earlier or later. He calls just when we're about to leave Heavenly Sea City. It couldn't be on purpose. Bian Junwu answered the phone, and Zhang Yi first asked if Bian Junwu had left Heavenly Sea City. Upon learning that they were already on their way back, Zhang Yi directly said, "Captain Bian, I just discovered a horde of zombies in the Turtle Mountain District, and I estimate there could be as many as several million." After hearing this, Bian Junwu immediately shouted, "Stop the car."